This program only reflects the personal views of the program hosts and or the individual contributors.
Hello and welcome to Newsline. I'm your host, Harminder Singh. To be or not to be? Well, the political reform package was not to be. And here with me in studio is Civic Party leader Alan Leong.
Hello.
Mr. Leong, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
You were quoting Shakespeare during your speech, so I thought
Famous line.
I thought I'd bring that into this because it was not to be, as I said. But the thing is that people are not focusing on what happened. During the speeches or what people were saying. It's what happened just as the vote was taking place, and that was most of the pro-establishment legislators got up and walked away. What was going through your mind when you saw that?
Well, I was as shocked and bewildered as the chief secretary. In fact, I looked in her direction, and obviously she had not been briefed in anticipation or in advance of what the pro-establishment camp was doing. The whole thing was, excuse my language, quite farcical. How can a vote as important, as significant historically as the one that took place on Thursday be handled in such a cavalier manner? It is beyond understanding. In fact, I was interviewed by a few international press after that, and I tried to explain to them they were waiting for Uncle Fat. And that's Leong Fat of the yes.
Hung Yi Kuk Functional Committee.
Yes, the Honorable Leong Fat.
Rural Committee.
And naturally, the international media would want me to explain why the vote of Uncle Fat was so important that a few tens of pro-establishment legislators would actually want to leave the chamber just to wait for him.
Do you buy that argument that it was really him they were waiting for? Or because there are a lot of conspiracy theories floating around all over the internet.
I know.
Yeah.
But after having given all these conspiracy theories some thoughts, I have come to the conclusion that none of those stands up. So I have to accept the as a matter of conclusion that really was a hiccup as a result of the pro-establishment camp trying to wait for Uncle Fat, but managed and handled in an unprofessional manner.
So at this point, do you think the Central People's Government, the CPG, is more upset with the pro-establishment camp or the Democrats for putting it down?
I think upset is too mild a word. I think they must have been furious about it. And that may also explain why quite a few of our pro-establishment legislators saw fit to go to the liaison office of the Central People's Government in Hong Kong to try to explain what happened. Now, in fact, the Civic Party issued a statement on Friday to point out that that wasn't something that legislators should do in observing the one country, two systems constitutional setup. If you go and look up Article 22 of the Basic Law, it provides in no vague terms that the Central People's Government ought not to interfere with any matters that are provided by the Basic Law to be within the remit and autonomy of Hong Kong's Special Administrative Region.
Well, do you think then there should be responsibility held for those who organized this walkout, particularly Jeffrey Lam? Do you think he should resign?
Well, I would leave it to him and the pro-establishment camp to decide. But I think this saga exposed a very important maybe you can say, lack of organization and the lines of command in the pro-establishment camp must be reviewed ASAP.
Even though the package has now been vetoed, you told the press Secretary of Justice Rimsky-Yoon should shut up when it came to the legal question of amending this package if it was passed in LegCo. Could you elaborate more on that?
Well,
that it wasn't a legal question?
I asked the Secretary for Justice to shut up because this was not and ought not to be a legal question. Of course, I need no reminder that every law can be amended. Of course. But the question is whether there is the political need, will, or incentive to amend it once we have pocketed this proposal. You see, once we have pocketed it, the Central People's Government can have every excuse to tell the rest of the world that it has already delivered the homework under Article 45, namely universal suffrage as promised and enshrined in that article. So why hand in another piece of homework after Hong Kong people has indicated their acceptance? And mind you, what I have been calling the vested interest rent-seeking alliance, once they have got a fake legitimacy for the chief executive who comes from that camp by using the votes that would be given us had we accepted the 831 restrained proposal. Why would there be political incentive?
Because it's the chief executive that must initiate the process according to the...
You see, as soon as they are successful in making use of our votes to legitimize the anointment system, to legitimize the chief executive that comes from that camp, why would they want to change it? They would not move an iota. So this is not a legal question. So it is really not for the the Secretary for Justice to deal with it as purely a legal question.
Well, moving on, it took us 18 years to receive this package. What if it takes another 18? Or do you think that the CPG is just playing in a waiting game until 2047?
Well, I don't think that option is open to the Central People's Government. One, Hong Kong has become ungovernable already. Now, how can you stay put by hanging on to the present electoral arrangements without trying to improve it so that especially the two upcoming generations would embrace the one country, two systems set up?
Because this was reported in Xinhua, and I'm quoting this: the MPCSC decision shall continue to serve as the constitutional ground for Hong Kong in the future as it enforces universal suffrage in the chief executive election, and its legal force is unquestionable. Sounds like they don't expect to offer a amended version down the line.
Well, as I have been sharing with Hong Kong people, in fact, if you go back to the 31st of August MPC Standing Committee decision, it was more conservative than the most conservative proposals that was available at that time. It was more conservative than the DAB proposal and FTU proposal, for example. And at that time, the so-called 18 scholars already announced their package. But you see, if the Central People's Government really intended that some arrangements could be agreed upon by the people of Hong Kong and the legislature, I just fail to understand why they did not pick any element from these proposals which they ought to be acceptable to the Central People's Government.
Do you think that, because this has been called by some student unions is, do you think there is a need to amend Article 45 of the Basic Law?
Well, this is certainly a subject that we need to look at seriously. 2047 is not that far away. If you look at land grants, we used to make land grants of 99 years or more. And if you look at mortgages, repayment terms could easily be looking at repayment within 30 years. So that already means that the question of what is to happen to the one country, two systems arrangement beyond 2047 is a matter that we need and ought to look at now.
Because in about 2 years is 30 years left. So
That's right.
Because this was the problem before the handover, is that they weren't sure how to, without an agreement from the British and the Chinese side, they weren't sure how to write contracts and mortgages, so that same issue is about to come up.
Exactly.
Okay, so do you think then that when it concerns, at least after the LegCo elections, do you think it's time to hit the reset button when it comes to the relationship between the legislature, the executive government, and the CPG?
Well, certainly. I think the veto of the package proposed by the SAR government really should immediately trigger efforts and attempts to mend the big divide between the two poles of Hong Kong. And Central People's Government, SAR government, and the Legislative Council, including both the pro-establishment camp and the democratic camp, we all should put our heads together and try to work something out for Hong Kong.
Okay, I just got to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. And welcome back to Newsline. Mr. Lin, let's continue with this. You said that we have a deeply polarized society in Hong Kong. So how do we begin to mend it?
Well, so far as the pan-democratic camp is concerned, I think we expect to see rejuvenation within, I think, every political party. We hope to field more young candidates for the elections, both in 2015 and 2016. And this rejuvenated political parties would better collaborate with the up-and-coming young political forces in a civil society. You probably have noticed that there are at least 12 young professional bodies that really mushroomed after the Occupy movement. And they have already made their impacts felt by influencing polls done by different professional bodies on whether or not that body and members should accept the pocketing of the government proposal.
So you think some young blood is needed to help mend society in Hong Kong, but a lot of people feel that the young people are too radicalized to get anything done, because all that might happen is more confrontation with the executive and Central People's Government.
Well,
or is that what's needed?
Well, their being radical is really forced by the attitude taken by the Central People's Government and the way that the CPG has been implementing the Basic Law. Now, I was in fact the last one to speak at the 31st May meeting in Shenzhen between the Pan-Democrats and the three directors. I actually told Director Wang Guangya that they kept on saying, as a matter of their rhetoric, that, Hong Kong has become more and more radical, and we do not want to see even discussions of Hong Kong independence and so-called localized groups flying British flag, etc. But I was telling the director that, do you know, it was because of the Central People's Government's attitude and the way that it had interpreted the Basic Law that actually forced our future two generations to behave like that. It is, I use the expression, self-fulfilling prophecy. So I think if the Central People's Government goes back to the basics, goes back to where we came from since the 1980s, and once again accord enough of respect to Hong Kong people, there certainly would be a way out.
So do you think that the Central People's Government needs to be more liberal in its stance with Hong Kong?
Well, it is not a matter of being liberal or not, Harry. It is really whether they are prepared to respect what, as a matter of history, had been promised to Hong Kong people. You see, in the 80s, we were then very anxious and actually worried or even feared reverting to a sovereign that practices people's democratic dictatorship. And we looked to the Sino-British Joint Declaration together with its 14 annexes to help preserve what we then had. And we had the promise from the Central People's Government that the 14 annexes would be implemented through the one country, two systems arrangement under the Basic Law. But remind ourselves what the white paper published by the State Council say on the 10th of June. It basically said to Hong Kong people, the CPG is no longer restraining the exercise of its omnipotent powers. Right? So where was that promise? Where are we left with?
But don't you think now with the veto of the package that the executive government, Central People's Government actually won? They don't care about implementing a more liberal or a package that more society can swallow, because they still control the outcome almost of the election, because it's only going to be 1,200 kingmakers, as you've called it, are going to select the next one. So what incentive do they really have?
But the constitutional duty under Article 45 of the Basic Law obliging the CPG and the SAR government to make a proposal acceptable to 2/3 of the Legislative Council for electing the chief executive, that piece of homework has not been delivered.
So they're obligated to pass Article 45, a package based on it.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think of Ronnie Tong, Civic Party member, his statement that we need to understand one country, two systems before we restart discussion about the chief executive election? What do you think about that statement from the party?
Well, I have been learning from Ronnie as to how we should understand the one country, two systems. But I have always thought that if you care to look at what the history books say, it is quite a clear case that the Central People's Government has been departing from the promises that we received in the early 1990s when the Basic Law was promulgated, and it seems that it needs no rocket scientist to understand this. Article 22 of the Basic Law clearly says that the Central People's Government ought not interfere with matters within SAR's autonomy, but they actually saw fit to ring up legislators, trying to get those legislators to vote in the way that they suggested.
So you disagree with Ronnie Tan that we need to to understand one country, two systems again?
Well, we certainly need to understand what the mainland leaders have in mind. But I hope they would reciprocate by trying to understand Hong Kong in the way that Hong Kong people think.
So what do you believe then is the role of the Central People's Government when it comes to Hong Kong's constitutional reform?
Well, as the basic law says, so far as the chief executive election goes, any amendment would need to have the NPC Standing Committee's approval as the final step. And so far as electrical elections amendment packages are concerned, well, we would have to file that with the NPCSC. So they would have that role, but it is not the role, I think, that they have been playing in the recently vetoed package. Now, remind ourselves, please, of what the Chinese side had replied to the British side during the negotiation of the basic law, I mean the Sino-British Joint Declaration. I did a piece of research just for my speech delivered on Wednesday. There was this record that the British side asked the Chinese side, well, would you see fit to promise universal suffrage to Hong Kong after 2007 and 2008? The answer officially recorded was, well, there's no need for the Chinese side to make any promise. It is for the Hong Kong people to decide. So this is where we came from. And Lu Peng, the then director, also made similar statements in a press interview in 1993.
Yes,
That's right.
You said that post the vote in the press conference, you said that this is not the end of the democratic movement, it's the start of a new wave. Could you give more details about that?
Oh, you see, the umbrella movement has left Hong Kong with a completely new way of thinking as to what our next two generations are having in mind, you see. And it is important for the political parties to try to not only rejuvenate themselves, but to collaborate with these up-and-coming young forces. So, in fact, I have suggested, and the lunchbox meeting already agreed, that we would meet before the close of business of this legislative year, so that we could deliberate on the way forward. So this is what I meant by the veto not being the closing of the chapter, but beginning of a new wave.
So in the future, will you want to negotiate with the Hong Kong SAR government, or do you believe that the real power actually lies in the Central People's Government and it's just better to negotiate with them, because your party and a lot of pan-democrats just call C.Y. Leong a puppet? So I guess you would say that you want to talk to the puppet master. So is that what your future plans are?
Well, I think constitutionally, the Hong Kong SAR government is still the one that we would want to talk to for the start. But practically, I think we certainly have to build some mutual trust between the CPG and Hong Kong, especially the democratic camp. But when you talk about building of mutual trust, you must know that while we would try to understand how the leaders in Zhongnanhai think, I hope they would also reciprocate by respecting Hong Kong's way of thinking.
I just have less than a minute left, and I'm going to ask you this. Now that we've reciprocated back to the original way of selecting the chief executive, will you run again for the chief executive election?
Well, when I ran in 2007, there was a meaning because we wanted to let Hong Kong people experience what a real debate on TV would be like. Now, that had been done, and if anybody is to run from the pan-democratic camp, a reason must be found.
Okay, well, we'll just have to leave it at that. Thank you for joining me today. I'll be back next week.